You're standing inside a secret military prison. It houses what's left of the Nazi high command.
I will have, as you say, my day in court.
I know more.
Yes? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Mr. Vanderbilt, can you hear me? Okay, let's commence. Well, good afternoon and welcome to the new press conference of this edition of the San Sebastian Film Festival. As you know, we're going to present one of the films that form part of the official section this year. We're going to present Nuremberg, the film by James Vanderbilt. To present the film, we have the director himself and also a screenplay writer. And so if you want, please ask your questions. And if not, I will give you a hand because I think it's a great chance to talk directly with him. So please raise your hand if you want to ask a question. There's a first question in the front, it seems. Hi. Congratulations for the film, and thank you very much. I have a question about at the world as it is at present. Do you think your film, one of the intentions behind your film could be, do you think it will help to promote the social debate that exists nowadays vis-a-vis how things are going in the world nowadays? Thank you.
No, sorry.
Sorry. Volumen.
So sorry. I didn't touch anything.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, I can hear you now.
Good.
Thank you so much.
Can you repeat the question, please? That would be the best bet. Thank you. Hang on. See, yes. Okay, I was just saying, as the world is at present, whether you believe that seeing your film is another reason to help to the social debate that currently exists with people in the street and in society. Do you think so?
Sorry, thank you so much for that. I can't speak to whether my film will do anything like that, but I'm sorry, I'm going to turn this down because it's actually feeding back into my... I can't speak to whether the film will do anything for that. This is a film I started working on 13 years ago, and I thought it was, just an incredible story. I read Jack L. High's book proposal, The Nazi and the Psychiatrist, which was only 6 or 7 pages, and it was the quickest I'd said yes to anything. And the thing I was so attracted to is this idea of a psychiatrist at the end of World War II who gets the opportunity to analyze what the nature of evil is. And I thought that this was such a fascinating thing to try and capture. And I thought it was relevant then. I think it's relevant now, and I think it unfortunately will be relevant in the future. But it was such an incredible story that takes place at such an incredible time. So I can't speak to anything in terms of that other than I just felt it was just something that spoke to me personally as a filmmaker. I'm so sorry, this is incredibly loud in my ears when I speak. My apologies, I'm so sorry. Oh, that's better, thank you.
Does it work? Yes.
Yes, it just went, okay, no, that's better, yeah. I was just hearing myself terribly loudly, which is my nightmare. No, I think we were okay. Hello? I got nothing.
Is that better? Is that better?
Thank you.
Lovely.
Lovely. Sorry.
Good.
My apologies.
Not working? Yes, it's working. Okay, my question is in English. Your film is a very tough film that is very relevant to tough times we're living in, where war crimes are happening all over the world. So I have to ask you a tough question. I want to ask you, what do you think is the symbolic legacy of the American initiative to bring war criminals before a court of justice When last year President Trump hosted Vladimir Putin on American soil, against whom the International Court of Justice had issued an international arrest warrant for war crimes? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I don't, first of all, I don't say it's necessarily the United States' legacy of it. I think the thing that's amazing about this period of history was it was 4 different nations coming together. And nations that weren't necessarily in cooperation with one another at the time. The United States and the Russians were sort of just engaging in the Cold War. And, you know, as Robert Jackson says at the beginning of the film, we need everybody. We need the British, we need the French, we need the Russians. You can't do it without the Russians. We need everybody. And so for me, it was really about an incredible time in history, which is, and it's, by the way, it's been 80 years this year since the Nuremberg trials began, which was an important anniversary as well, coming together to try and do, I think, a noble and honorable thing. And that's what we really wanted to explore in the making of the film.
Que hay una pregunta.
Hi, first of all, congratulations on the film. I was just wondering, because obviously the Nuremberg trials have been well, treated into a movie before, and they've been explored in books and in articles. Basically, when you started working in a new movie about the Nuremberg trials, what did you decide that was going to be your approach that could feel different to what has been explored about them? And also working with Russell Crowe in such a pretty villainous character, so very complex, obviously, mind. What was the process for you guys to get him to be in his mind?
Sure. Well, you know, first of all, it wasn't a situation where I was looking to find a story about this period of history, this time. It really was Jack Elhai's book proposal, which was only 6 or 7 pages, and I read, and as I think I've said, it was the fastest I said yes to anything in my life, and it was truly, it was a story I thought I knew a lot about, but I didn't know a lot about it. I did not know that there were psychiatrists who worked for the U.S. Army in the 1940s. I didn't know that Douglas Kelly was sort of, you know, a guy who, you know, the war is ended for him and he thinks he's going to go home, but instead he gets orders to evaluate the Nazi high command. And, you know, for a psychiatrist, I think, he felt it was the opportunity of a lifetime to have somebody like this dropped into his lap that he could evaluate. And so just as a filmmaker, I thought that's such a fascinating story that I've never seen this kind of way into a story like this before. So that really fascinated me. And then as I, you know, researched, I said, yes, I would love to do that. And then I started researching the story. And as Jack wrote the book, I was reading the pages and doing other research. And then I found about the story of Robert Jackson, who in the United States, I had never heard of. I sort of feel like in the United States, you would think you would hear about this gentleman who had done this incredible thing and sort of stood up and said, even though the Army said, you know, we don't want to put these men on trial, we think putting people on trial for following orders is a terrible idea. And yet Jackson said, no, this is incredibly important for us to do. And then obviously not only did that and convinced people to do it, but then took a leave of absence from the court in order to become the prosecutor for the United States. And you know, we talk about it's almost like building the airplane as you fly it. So first I thought the movie was over here with just Kelly and Goering, and then I realized, well, the movie's also sort of over here with Jackson. And then I read about Howie Triest, who, you know, it's funny, when we first showed the movie to people, they said, oh, and it's really interesting you made up that translator character. He's just a really interesting story. I was like, we didn't make him up. That's a true story. So I went, oh, the movie's now over here. So as we sort of, it grew and grew and grew as I built it in a way that I was thrilled by, but also as a writer and as a filmmaker, you sort of go, we only have so much movie where we can put all of this together. So part of it was sort of weaving that stuff together in the screenplay. And then in terms of Russell Crowe, he is one of the biggest reasons this movie exists today. I started writing the film 13 years ago, and around 8 years ago was able to send him the script. I didn't know him. We had a mutual acquaintance who was his agent, and I sent it to his agent. And his agent read it and liked it and sent it to Russell, and Russell read it, and then the agent called me and he said, okay, he's in. And I said, great, so I'm going to talk to him, we're going to get on the phone. He goes, no, he doesn't need to talk to you, he's in. And I said, okay, that's something that doesn't happen very, very often. And as we, it's an independent film. And money comes in, money falls out, so that's why it took so many years. But he stayed with it all the way through it. And then once we finally got enough money to shoot, and that's a testament to Richard Saperstein at Bluestone Entertainment and Walden Media, all the people there who independently financed it. And Russell and I really started talking about the part. He really wanted to make sure that he was the human version of Hermann Göring, and we talked a lot about it. And he said to me, look, this is going to take me to, it's not a great mental space to live in for me. But he fully committed to it, and he fully invested in it, and did an incredible amount of research. He traveled around Germany to the different places in Göring's childhood. I mean, he really put himself in depth to it. And I'm just eternally grateful for the commitment he put into this film and the work he did, because he's Russell Crowe. He doesn't necessarily need to do that anymore, but he was as hungry as an actor as I've ever seen anyone I've worked with, and that was a true gift to me.
Aquí hay una pregunta, por favor.
There's a question here.
Hello, thank you. Congratulations on your film.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask, how did you approach the work with the actors to build their psychological arc and build the courtroom tension too?
Thank you. It was really, I love actors who come with ideas. I think that as a director, the worst thing is to hire somebody who just asks you, how do you want it? And so to a woman and a man, everybody in this film came to the movie with ideas. And a lot of times it was conversations. Rami Malek is a perfect example. Rami, the first time, I met him he had read the script and he had volunteered to do the movie. It was amazing. And a gentleman like Rami Malek, who has an Academy Award like Russell does, doesn't need to, he can sit back and wait for people to call him up and say, we'll give you X amount of money if you'll read this and say yes to it. And he didn't do that. He had called his agent and he said, what's out there that I should be reading, what's interesting. And it was just at the right time that we were looking for Kelly. And Rami read it and raised his hand, and John Papsadera, who was our casting director, incredible casting director who casts all of Christopher Nolan's movies and for some reason also casts mine, said, would you be interested in meeting with Rami Malek? And I said, absolutely, are you kidding me? I'm an enormous fan of his. And I met him one day for 3 hours, and he said, do you mind if I come over to your house tomorrow? And I said, no, I don't mind if you come over. And he showed up at 8 in the morning, and he met my kids, he met my wife, he met my dog, and we sat down all day, and we went through every scene in the script, and he would say, what do you think this scene means? And I would always say, well, I know what I think it means, but what do you think it means? What do you get out of it? And that's how I like to work with actors a lot, is to, my impulse is, I know what I think it is, but what I want to be is sort of surprised. And what I want to be is, I feel very much best idea wins as a director. And so, getting a group of incredibly talented actors together and letting them work the material out for themselves and letting them there's a reason it's called a play, because it's play. Letting them figure that out for themselves, we can all discover something along the way. So that's how I like to work with actors, and it's a murderer's row of people. So I was very blessed.
Hola James, ¿qué tal?
Hello.
Hi, it's a pleasure to see you. Congratulations for the film. It's a pleasure to come so far away from Peru and to see a beautiful film like yours. I'd like to ask you the scene that you most liked to film, and what was the most demanding scene you shot?
Oh, that's a great question. I can tell you the most demanding. The most demanding was the footage of the camps. And that was something that from the very, very beginning, the very first draft, I said, we're not going to recreate anything, we're not going to shoot anything, we're not going to try and do anything other than present what was presented in the courtroom. We're not going to put music under it. And, you know, and in reality, they showed almost an hour of footage in the courtroom that day. And obviously, for us, it's a film. You know, time is of the essence, so we show about 6 minutes in the film. And I asked the actors, you know, as they signed on, I said, listen, there's this scene. That footage is out there. Do me a favor, don't watch it. I want it to be an experience for you on the day. And they all agreed to it, and they came in, and we were shooting in this, on this incredible set. Eve Stewart, our production designer, built that set to scale of the original Nuremberg courtroom, to the inch. We had 300 extras, and everybody, their entire principal cast is in that scene. And I went out and, you know, I said to everybody, because there were the extras who didn't necessarily know what the day was going to be, you know, and I said, this is what we're doing today, and this is what you're going to see. And I explained it. We had a moment of silence before we rolled it, and then we had 4 cameras that day, and we put them each in front of one of our principals. And then we rolled and we showed the film. We had a projector there, and we showed the film on a real screen in real time. You know, and we have an amazing cast in this movie, so I don't want to say that no acting was required at that moment, but, you know, those images are as potent today as I think they were 80 years ago. And that was the hardest day, certainly. But it was something that was important to all of us to put in the film and to show in the film. In terms of the scene I most enjoyed, I will say it was actually, it was another courtroom scene in the sense of the final cross-examination between Goering and Jackson. And the scene on the page runs about 19 pages. And so, you know, when you're planning a film, you're in pre-production, the first AD, you know, breaks out what you're doing in the day, and you talk about the schedule. And, you know, she was amazing. Her name was Chilla, and she came to us and she said, okay, so we have 3 days to shoot this. We'll do the first third on the first day, the second third on the second day, obviously, and we'll finish on the third day. And I said, you know, Michael Shannon and Russell Crowe aren't going to want to do that. They're going to want to do it in 1 day. And she said, it's 20 pages of dialogue. You don't, that's a terrible idea. And I think the producers, one of them was here, was probably like, that's a terrible idea. And I said, I think they're going to want to do it. And so I went to both of them and I said, you know, we're supposed to shoot this over 3 days. And they both went, no, we're going to do this in 1 day. What are you talking about? And so, you know, again, it was another 4-camera day because we wanted to make sure we had everything. And so we set them up. And the other tricky thing about that scene is courtroom scenes, usually you have the lawyer is able to walk around. You know, it's always, you know, sort of walks over here and walks over there. But the way that courtroom was set up is the prosecutor never moves. So we couldn't do any camera trickery or that. It's just shot, 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 shot. So we set it up. And we were doing 25-minute takes with no cuts. And they were word perfect every time because we took all of those, the transcripts, the real transcripts, and put it in there. And after the first take, the entire courtroom of extras applauded for Michael and Russell. So just watching those 2 gentlemen put on a masterclass, I've never shot a 25-minute take in a movie in my life. I don't think I ever will shoot a 25-minute take in a movie in my life again. That, I think, was one of the most amazing days.
Hay una pregunta aquí.
Bueno,
James, thank you very much for the film. I'd like to ask you about the character of Douglas Ellie, because Goring, I don't think, historically, we don't need to know who it is. We know who it is. But I would like to know what drew your attention of Douglas Kelly when you researched work. How was it to research about him? And did you think from the outset in Rami to portray the role? Thank you.
Thank you so much for your question. I think Kelly was fascinating to me because he wasn't well known, because he was, as Goering puts it, a footnote in history. And you know, again, Jack L. High's, you know, amazing book about him told me a lot about him. And then Kelly's own book, 22 Cells in Nuremberg, I read, obviously, and sort of tells you a lot about him. But he was this enigma. And one of the things I was fascinated by, too, is, you know, for all intents and purposes, you know, we've seen psychiatrists in movies before, and they're usually some sort of Sigmund Freud kind of character stroking their beards and, you know, smoking a pipe. And Kelly was sort of none of those things. He was actually, you know, obviously an amateur magician, which is true. He was a kind of a rogue and a daredevil. There was a sequence I could never get in the film, but he used to get into test planes, I think, for the Air Force or the Navy to test how long you could stay awake at incredibly high speeds before a pilot would pass out. So he was all of these different things that I'd never seen in a psychiatrist before, and I was very sort of excited to explore that. And, you know, I feel like I always think casting is like cooking in a weird way. It's sort of like you don't want all the flavors to be the same flavor because the dish won't taste good. So Russell had a very specific energy to him and this seductive quality to him, which I thought was very important for Goering. And Rami has this incredible electricity to him and inquisitiveness. And this magnetism that he doesn't always get to use in films. I think sometimes he gets always cast as a little bit quirky and a little off. And, you know, he you know, spoiler alert, he killed James Bond. So he's always sort of been the, you know, sort of a little bit of the, never been the hero. And I loved the idea of him using that energy and his inquisitiveness to be a man who is trying to pierce what is the nature of evil. And also someone who is, you know, obsessed with it. You know, one of the things that Rami did that I thought was amazing is when he came onto the film, he hired a psychiatrist to analyze the script and to analyze the characters in it because he wanted to look at this as a psychiatrist would. And the psychiatrist came back to him and he said, Goering is the classical narcissist and Kelly is the classical obsessive. And so it made sense that he would be in danger of being swallowed by the darkness he was looking into.
Aquí hay una pregunta.
There's a question here.
Vanderbilt. I was wondering, like, you were talking about hard days on set where everything was like really difficult with shots on the camera. How did you like manage emotionally as a director, being in a like talking about a very hard topic and also like a very dark period in history, right?
Right.
And also, like, you were talking about Rami and Russell as being an anti-heroes. So how did you deal with that, and what kind of guidelines did you give to the two actors so they could portray these two anti-heroes, but people who also have humanity, right?
Right.
And have, like, their human side inside of them. Thank you.
Thank you. I think in terms of the human side of it, I think it's just a testament to them as actors that from the very beginning, it was just about finding the truth in the characters and the truth of the scene. It was never about, okay, in this scene, you're mean, or in this scene, you know, we don't like you, and in this scene, we do like you. You know, it was really about who are these people, what is going on with them at this period in their lives. You know, Russell was very, in a wonderful way, I was going to say adamant, but he didn't get any argument from me of, you know, he wanted to play Goering as a human being, you know, and I remember as we were in pre-production, he said, he sort of started thinking of him as Herman rather than Goering, because I have to think of him as Herman. You know, who is Herman? What is Herman feeling right now? What does Herman want now? And I thought that was brilliant. You know, and Rami in the same way. You know, there are moments with Douglas Kelly, you know, who is ostensibly our hero, and our way into the movie where he's not very heroic. But Rami embraced those moments. It wasn't about I have to have the audience on my side or I have to look good in this moment, or you know, it's more. You know, if I'm crossing a line, as this character's crossing a line in the movie, do we understand why he's doing that and why that feels right for him in the moment? So, you know, so much of directing is casting, and so much of it is putting the elements together and then creating, I think, an environment where they can succeed, where they can grow. And so, it was really, you know, just having those conversations with them and having and Michael Shannon as well too. I mean, Michael, who just is a tremendous actor. You know, I call him an actor's actor because he's the actor that other actors are really excited to be in a scene with. They're just sort of like, oh my God, I'm working with Michael Shannon. I can't believe it. And to have him play someone heroic and to play someone who, you know, Michael, you know, has played a lot of bad guys. And, you know, I remember him early on, you know, coming to me and going, this guy's really a hero, isn't he? He really put himself on the line. And I said, yeah. It's really a testament to our performers, I think, that they never would settle for a caricature or an archetype. And then in terms of how heavy the material was and how we all dealt with it, alcohol. But no, I think we all were very committed to telling the story. And so you have hard days and you have easy days, and sometimes you're shooting very serious scenes and you have to laugh afterwards so you don't cry.
Hay una pregunta ahí.
Another question here.
So you portray Goering as very charming and magnetic, which he might have been, but this brings, you also said the word seduced, like Malik's character is seduced by evil, which is a common apologetic idea that the majority of people are seduced by evil. But this is not what happened in Germany, which we know. And there's also this one line that stuck with me where it said, there are rumors about the camps. Now, the majority of people knew what was going on in the camps. It was not like it was a secret. So don't you think it's maybe ambivalent to portray it that way, that people are seduced by evil if they openly embrace it, and that the majority didn't know what was going on if they very well did?
Well, thank you very much for your question. I wasn't saying that people were seduced by evil necessarily. I was saying that Rami Malek's character, Kelly, seemed to be seduced by the personality of Hermann Goering and how charming it was. And it's you know, established that Goering was a very charming individual and was funny. And, you know, one person described him as the best dinner party companion you could ever have. And I found that very interesting because obviously Adolf Hitler, not known for his personality or anything like that. So playing that and that relationship was what I was referring to in terms of that. And, you know, again, I don't think one brush paints everything in the same manner. I do think that one of the amazing things about the trials were showing those films at that time drove home. There's knowing something, and then there's seeing something. And using that footage, and it was the first time ever it had been used as a prosecutorial exhibit, was really the turning point and the fulcrum point for the world to see what had really happened.
Aquí hay una pregunta.
Another question. Hi. My question in Spanish. Gabriela Bavo from Culturizate from Chile. I would like to know, according to you, what are the lessons of Nuremberg that today we have still not borne in mind, given the fact that in your film you say this deployment in the court case is that we're going to avoid a genocide taking place in the world in the future. But however, we're seeing that nowadays what's happening in Gaza, we're seeing that live it's a genocide that can be seen live. What haven't we learnt from the Nuremberg trials that make us repeat history? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your question. I think the reason I wanted to tell this story, and I started writing it 13 years ago, was I felt it was relevant then. And one of the reasons was, you know, for me, I'm 49 years old. I'm almost 50 years old. Both of my grandfathers fought in World War II. I had friends who had lost people in the camps, family members, grandparents. And so that period of time was something that I felt like I could touch, even though I wasn't that age, you know, I didn't live through it, but there were people I knew who had been through it who I loved very much, who told me about it in first-person accounts. And when I talk to my children about it, it feels like something that is so far away from them. You know, the American Revolution, or you know, the War of 1812 for in the U.S. And I think this was an amazing moment in time where people came together and tried to do the right thing and chose justice over vengeance, and worked really hard to do that. You know, history is not a one-on-one binary thing. We don't always learn all of the lessons that from the past, but I think understanding the past and revisiting the past and making it come alive again in a way, you know, I love movies, I love cinema. That's what speaks to me in a way that's different from facts and figures and history lessons and things you can learn in school. Telling stories is, I think, how you move people, and that's what I love about it. And so that was it was incredibly important in that way for me to try and tell this story.
Hay una pregunta aquí.
Another question here. Congratulations for the film. I would like to know, it seems that at the end, the psychiatrist comes to an extra conclusion in the sense that the origin of evil is in human nature. That we could read that into it. I would like to know, after making the film and read the book and having researched with other documents, what do you believe about this? What's the origin of evil? Is it in human nature, or are they circumstances of another nature?
Well, I'd like to thank you for the simple question. It's a good question. I don't know if I can answer it here. What I can say is it's something that's always fascinated me, and I think it's something that fascinates a lot of us, and we always are sort of scratching at. I made a movie many years ago called Zodiac with David Fincher, which was sort of a similar idea, a very different story, but was sort of about the nature of evil and where does it come from, and obsession and thing. And I think it's something I've always been drawn to. I think for me, I think it's about the human condition and what are we capable of as people? What are we capable of? Not other people, but ourselves. It's looking inward as opposed to just outwards. It's, you know, not always othering people. You know, it's sort of understanding that, you know, I don't know. It's a great question that I'm doing a terrible job of answering, but I don't think I've come to one conclusion about it. I think part of it is, you know, questioning it as part of the journey for me. And exploring it as part of the journey, and speaking of David Fincher, he said something to me many years ago that's always stayed with me about films, which was that, in his opinion, great films ask you questions, bad films give you all the answers. And so I love that idea of a movie that asks you questions that maybe it doesn't tie up into a nice little bow at the end of it. And I think, you know, I don't say this is a great film, but maybe this is a film that tries to do that.
Hay una pregunta aquí más.
Another question? Yes, good afternoon. Thank you for the film. At a given moment, the psychiatrist character in an interview on the radio at the interview, he's convinced that half the population could annihilate the other rest of the population if they let them have power over them. And they recommend not criticize the United States if he wants to sell his book better. So therefore, I'd like to know whether at a given moment in the script, you were thinking in circumstances of the present, the political situation at present in the United States, or whether you were always thinking about what happened at that historical period, in that period in time in the past. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The interesting thing about that scene and that moment was not just that I wrote it 13 years ago, but that's directly a line from Douglas Kelly's book, 22 Cells in Nuremberg, that he wrote in 1947. So that is, you know, something that he was left with in his mind, and I think haunted him. in a very real way. And obviously you've seen the film, I don't want to spoil the film for anyone else, but obviously really affected him. So it was, you know, one of the things that I found so amazing about the story, not to spoil it, but you've all seen it, is the duality of how they both ended up, and how they both exited the world. And I found that sort of incredible. And so the fact that he came to the conclusions he came to and was not embraced for it, but shunned for it, I thought was incredibly compelling.
No sé si queda alguna pregunta.
Not sure if there are any further questions. I think everyone's. Okay. Thank you very much, James Vanderbilt. Good luck with your film. Thank you very much for coming along.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the great questions. Thank you.